Alrighty, this is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and this video is about the succession crisis of the Latter-day Saints. As you can see, I'm on the Wikipedia page. It covers the general format, though it's very weak on detail and weak on referencing. So here they reference another reference with James Strang. So I'll help you through this as best I can. Alright, so Joseph Smith died 27th of June 1844 and did not appoint a successive situation for his removal. And people in the members of the church, they say, no, Joseph Smith appointed Brigham Young, and he's God's true successor and prophet of the latter days. No, you would be wrong. The church lied to you in order to maintain their position of succession. That's what people do. That's what everybody did. Everybody claimed to be the successor and that the others were wrong. That's how it always works out. When everybody has their own opinions, they always complain that the others' opinions are wrong. That's just how it is. So you need to know the facts, and you'll need to understand what then who is the successor? Is the church gone? Is the priesthood gone? Is everything in chaos and ruin and apostasy? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Your worst nightmares all come true. So, alrighty. We won't go into the historical background, so we'll just go right into the theoretical successors. Okay, so as they correctly say, it was not immediately clear to Latter-day Saints who would lead the church. When you take out the leader, if they don't have an established format for who's to succeed, which Joseph Smith did but didn't, at least nobody knew of it because it was in the Doctrine and Covenants, and I'd have to check when that was put in. It'd be section 107, and nope, it was in the 1835 edition. So yeah, the members of the church had it since the 1835 edition. So yeah, there's the section 101 was the statement on marriage in the 1835 edition of the church as well. Wait a minute. Yeah, it was removed in 1876, the year before Brigham Young died. Alright, but that's a different subject that I've covered in other editions, other videos. Okay. So yeah, the members of the church had it in their possession. Brigham Young referenced section 107, but he referenced the wrong verses. And he did that on purpose because the true verses for succession would disqualify Brigham Young. So everybody got fooled. Hiram Smith, brother of Joseph Smith, was the patriarch of the church. He would have been great, except he died too in Carthage jail. So he was gone. Samuel Smith, also a younger brother of Joseph and Hiram, and so he would have also been an excellent candidate as a family member. William Smith, also an excellent candidate. and he actually made the claim to succeed his brothers as the presiding patriarch, except that Brigham Young had him excommunicated after Joseph's murder. Brigham Young and William Smith did not really like each other, and when Joseph Smith was arrested over the bank failure, Brigham Young tried to usurp his authority and take care of the church as he supposed. And part of that goes back to 1838 with the leadership crisis, as I call it. And the leadership crisis was when the Danites, a secret organization within the church, kicked out the leaders of the church. And among those was Thomas B. Marsh. Thomas B. Marsh was the mission president of the traveling 12 apostles. And that's what it was referred to back then. So Mormons don't understand this, that the church structure was different than the current structure today. And so the missionary organization was through the traveling 12 apostles. And so that needs to be understood. And when Thomas B. Marsh was chased out by the Danites, Brigham Young then was moved into position as the president of that organization. But Joseph Smith was in jail, so he didn't get to really approve it. But it was just through natural selection of the one next in line, so to speak. So I don't know if there was too much to that. Joseph Smith never removed Brigham Young from that position when he got out of jail. However, Brigham Young, as president of the Traveling 12, excommunicated Thomas B. Marsh. On today, it's the celebration of Thomas B. Marsh's excommunication by Brigham Young, not Joseph Smith. And it had nothing to do with milk being held back by his wife. That's all a lie. It had to do with the Danites. And so Brigham Young also kicked out William Smith from the Traveling 12 during this 1835 succession crisis. So when Joseph Smith got back out, he put William Smith back in. But he didn't remove Brigham Young. So he accepted Brigham Young's position as the new president of the Traveling 12, the missionary organization, but didn't approve of William Smith getting booted out and put William Smith back in. And so when Joseph Smith died, Brigham Young again kicked out William Smith from the Traveling 12, and this time excommunicated him. And so Joseph Smith was not around to make sure that didn't happen. So that's what happened to William Smith, and William Smith wanted to be one of those to succeed because of his family right. But not too many. So here we have, let's see, there's something about Samuel Smith here. Samuel Smith suddenly died in July 30th, 1844. That's the next month after Joseph. So I'm sure that there was nothing involved with anything, that it was natural causes, obviously, huh? But here we have under William Smith, the Williams accusing Brigham Young of having poisoned Samuel Smith. So isn't that nice? So that's probably why. What? Young, however, denied. Never. I thought he said never. I was imposing a word in that. So yeah, Young, of course, denied it. uh, and claiming he didn't know anything about Joseph Smith's death for 3 to 4 weeks afterward. So he agreed to it after? Anyway, no physical evidence exists that suggests that Samuel was the victim of foul play. He was young. What's he doing dying? That's foul play in and of itself. Alright. So again, here we have, Quinn and some other guy, unreliable source. That's their sources, that no physical evidence exists. Yeah. So Wikipedia is not the greatest. We have to take it with a grain of salt, but at least we get an idea of what was going on. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it and declare it. Samuel Smith was murdered. All right. So, children of Joseph Smith also had claim. Let's see. Several church leaders stated that on 27th of August, 1834, and April 22nd, 1839, Joseph Smith indicated his eldest son, Joseph Smith III, would be his successor. Is this Quinn again? Nope. Again, don't quote secondary sources, because this Roger Lonius, from his book Joseph Smith III, Pragmatic Prophet, he should have the original source from which he's getting this. So don't quote this guy who wrote the book. Go to the source from his book. And at the time of Smith's death, Smith III was 11 years old. Well, you can just do what they did in the 1890 with Hatshepsut, and Emma Smith could have become the president of the church. She did, after all, have the priesthood given to her by her husband Joseph Smith for the Relief Society. Again, on the 17th of March, 1842. So again, happy anniversary for the Relief Society receiving the priesthood of God. But then Brigham Young, of course, took it away with his organization. And then Emma didn't realize that she could pass it on, and didn't, and therefore it died with her. Similarly, 1844, April, Joseph Smith had reportedly prophesied his unborn child would be a son who would be named David, who would make his mark in the world. Now, this is involving Mark Hoffman. Mark Hoffman's forgery is Joseph Smith III being the successor. But this unknown, unborn child, David, people were actually taking this. Valerie Tippett's Avery. Come on, guys. Primary sources. This, if anybody knows anything about the Bible, is the prophecy of the last days Jewish Messiah. And so Joseph Smith, claiming a future child who would be named David, is actually taken from the Old Testament prophecies of the last days Jewish Messiah. And it's not David, it's the branch. He's supposed to be the successor to the throne of King David. And so again, happy birthday to the Jewish Messiah, the man-child, as he is called by John the Revelator in Revelation chapter 12, and to the Mormons in section 85 of the Doctrine and Covenants, called the One Mighty and Strong. And of course, the Egyptians had a name for him too, Horus. So happy birthday to him on the 17th of March. Wow, everything's happening all on the 17th. Isn't that amazing? Sort of like 9/11 with the Mountain Meadows Massacre and the Poppy Bush as CIA going and forming a coup and Chile on the 11th, or September 11th. Isn't that interesting how certain dates reemerge for certain things? Alrighty, so then Oliver Cowdery, he was the second elder of the church. Joseph Smith had actually changed the second elder to a first presidency. Cowdery was chased out and excommunicated in the leadership crisis of 1838. So yeah, it was still a second elder at that point in time, sort of. Well, no. Alright, excuse me for a minute while I check the date of section 107. You can't see the scripture program on your screen. I don't understand why. Alright, yeah, 1835, March 28th. So this would have been put in the 1835 edition. So, yeah. So he wasn't really the second elder. He would have been put in originally as the second elder, but would have been a part of the first presidency of the church when Joseph Smith changed it to a first presidency and not a rule of elders. He actually made an elders quorum separate from an apostles quorum, and so yeah, he changed it over the course of his life as the church leader. And so they've even put in you can see the church's influence here. Until the time of his excommunication, held the keys of the dispensation with Joseph. So, yeah, you got to be careful when people put their own wording in here, rather than just the facts, man. Because keys should have technically been put in parentheses, and so, alright, and then a footnote should have been put in there to the Doctrine and Covenants, where Oliver Cowdery gets the keys with Joseph. Alright, and so, yeah, Oliver Cowdery said, well, hey, even though I've been excommunicated, I still can lead the church in the absence of the president. So, yeah, and he is like a second or third cousin of Lucy Mack, and that's of Joseph Smith. So he's family. And David Whitmer, one of the witnesses, and I should probably get this to be the picture, the thumbnail picture. I don't know if you'll be able to see how I'm going to do this. I won't worry about it now. Alright, so David Whitmer, he was the president of the High Council in Zion. That is the standing 12. That is the administration 12. This is the organization that Brigham Young changed the traveling 12 into once he got into power in the kingdom of Deseret, where he became king and great high priest over those who followed him and survived the wintry trek. David Whitmer, if we were to follow the pattern that we are today in the LDS Church, David Whitmer had the highest claim, except for the 1838 succession crisis, where the Danites said, "Get out, we don't want you." So, June 1838, he's chased out. And who do they put as the source? David Whitmer was not excommunicated. David Whitmer addressed to all believers. Yeah, David Whitmer went on to actually form his own religion. And so the 1887 book that he wrote, An Address to All Believers in Christ, that's where he finally gets around to saying, oh yeah, Joseph Smith also had this 14-year-old girl, which is supported by Brigham Young's church, and so I trust them. And so, yeah, I was surprised to hear that Joseph was practicing polygamy in secret. I'm shocked and horrified, because Joseph Smith was always preaching against it. So, yeah, why are you trusting the Brighamite church for your source of information when you knew that that wasn't the case? Alright, so, yeah, and they're quoting somebody from a book. Ebby L.V. Richardson. Come on, guys. Primary sources. Don't do secondary sources. And if the secondary source doesn't list the primary source, then you've got to question, why did you put that in your book? You're making a claim that's unsupported by a primary source. Nobody questions these people. Alright. So David Whitmer would have, and since he wasn't excommunicated, he just abandoned the office. He then had a legitimate claim, according to the way that Brigham Young redesigned the system for succession when he died. So that's why it is the way it is now in the church, is because of what Brigham Young changed it to. But back then, when Joseph Smith died, they had nothing. They knew not what they should do. So, alright. Sidney Rigdon also believed he should be a successor, sort of. He wanted to be the gatekeeper for the church. I can't remember the term he used. They should say it in here. But he was in the first presidency and went on to form his own Church of Jesus Christ. And yeah, he had a claim. But as a first presidency, Mormons don't see it today as being a legitimate claim because Brigham Young changed it. And so it's common that when the president of the church dies, the counselors in the first presidency go back into their position in the Quorum of the 12. This was not the way Joseph Smith set it up. This is the way that it ended up getting set up through Brigham Young. So everybody needs to understand that. And then here they make a mistake with Brigham Young. They said, President of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. No, the traveling Quorum of 12 Apostles. See, this has got bias written all over it. So, it's great that the church wants things to be accurate, not anti, but they need to make sure they're accurate and not biased. So Wikipedia needs to, enforce the church to comply with the rules of Wikipedia as they claim they have. Alright, James Strang is a fun guy. James Strang is a member of the church. He was an elder, so the lower office of the Melchizedek priesthood, because Joseph Smith had set it up to have the high priests, and from among the high priests you'd have your first presidency and apostles, but the high priests were the highest office in the church. Then you had the 70s that were eventually organized, and John Taylor was the one who created stake 70s, so that pattern continued at the local level, and so the 70s were the second office of the Melchizedek priesthood. And then you have elders. And originally that's what Joseph Smith established as the whole Melchizedek priesthood. Once you get the Melchizedek priesthood, elder. But this was changed by Joseph Smith over the course of the church's history during Joseph Smith's life. And elder then became just a regular entrance level into the Melchizedek priesthood. And so the leaders of the church today have tried to claim, no, it's all just one priesthood. It's not like the Aaronic priesthood with deacon, teacher, and priest levels. Yes, it was. And the church is lying to you guys. So when they took out the 70 from the stake, that was the first taking away of leadership authority in the church. But they still kept the general 70 with the higher leadership, the Big B brethren. So fine. But when Nelson came in and immediately took away the high priest's office, the Mormons should have rebelled right then and there. They should have said, hell no. But you didn't. You all capitulated, you all complied, and you all bent over and took it. And now you all justify it and apologize for it and say, that's God's will, he's the prophet, he tells us what to do. Anyway, so yeah, if you guys don't mind not going to the Celestial Kingdom, okay. But yeah, James Strang, an elder. And he didn't really have much of a footing, did he? He's in the lower Melchizedek rung. And so he wasn't in any position of authority. He wasn't a 70. He wasn't a member of the high priesthood. And so he, however, said that he had a letter of appointment. If you can see that on the screen here. And it looks like they have a link on it because it's colored blue, purplish blue. And so there it is. They've even got the document. A letter of appointment, a 3-page document where he says Joseph Smith had written to him and said, you will succeed the church after I die as the prophet and president. But James Strang was also very smart and clever, because he knew that his position would not alone get him into people's favor, and that a letter from Joseph Smith also would not guarantee that as well. And so he had to come up with something else to help get more members to his side. And he actually succeeded with that to some degree. He got some prominent Mormons to join him. And what he did was he claimed that he had discovered buried plates with ancient writing on them that he had translated. And that therefore he confirmed the letter by Joseph Smith that he claimed he had to be the successor, and was able to fool lots of Mormons to follow him. So, fun guy, but I would not join. So, but yeah, it was a very clever technique, because if he can show that he has the keys of the priesthood, which involve seer, which is involving translation, well, then I guess it must be, because God certainly wouldn't give the key of translation to somebody who doesn't have the right and mantle and authority from God to run his church. Which then begs the question, what about Brigham Young, who apparently neither him nor any of his successors to President Nelson have had this key of translation, despite claiming they are seers and we must obey them and not criticize them for not demonstrating their fruits of, or lack thereof, of translation. So yeah, he had a great plot there to fool people, but yeah, in the end it was based on a lie. So people eventually fell off, it looks like, at 1856. So he had them for 12 years. Alright, and then Granville Hedrick. We don't know if he was an elder. We can't find the record, but apparently he was an elder. He's the one that is causing the church lots of grief and building the Kingdom of God in Jackson County, Missouri. He's the Church of Christ there on the Temple lot, and not wanting to sell it to the church because he knows very well what the church is planning to do with it if he sells it to the church. And then also the Church of Christ with the Eliza message also branched off of Granville Hedrick. So those two churches come from him. Then there's also Alpheus Cutler. He was in the presiding high council, one of the members. So he had an eventual claim, as David Whitmer did. He was not the president. He was in the presiding high council, just as one of the Quorum of the 12, standing 12. So he had a legitimate eventual claim. He was also in the Council of 50. That was the government organization that Joseph Smith intended, expecting the collapse of the United States government and wanting to establish a new government upon the ashes of America, when America is destroyed by the Illuminati that Joseph Smith referred to as the Gadianton robbers in the Book of Mormon. And then Joseph Smith III, you guys all know about that. They're now the Community of Christ, but originally were the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they're titled RLDS back then. But in order to be a part of the Christian community, they gave up the Book of Mormon, and now they're the Community of Christ. Alright, is there others from here? Emma. Urged Marks. Okay, who's Marks? Nauvoo Stake President William Marks was president of the High Council at the time. Okay, so he was the legitimate successor. Alright, William Marks had the claim according to the current tradition that Mormons use today. He was the president of the Quorum of the 12, as we now call it today. He was the president of the standing Quorum of the 12 called the High Council in Nauvoo. And even though it was the stake of Nauvoo, this is changed and altered by Brigham Young when he turned the traveling 12 into the standing 12. So, Emma Smith urged Marks to succeed Joseph Smith as president and trustee in trust of the church. But Marks instead supported Sidney Rigdon. So that's why he didn't put his hat into the ring. So he would have been the one if they followed the pattern that church is doing today. The Quorum of the 12 were originally ordained to be traveling ministers. Yes, thank you for finally pointing that out. But you're assuming that it's the same that Brigham Young had. Brigham Young changed the traveling ministers. Alright. Let's see if there's anybody else we can find here. No, no, no. No, no, no. Here we again see Mormon influence on the presentation on Wikipedia. It says, Brigham Young, in particular, became one of Smith's closest confidants. Only in the sense of keep your enemies close and your friends close and your enemies closer. And occasionally took charge during the 1840s in Smith's absence. Oh my God. It's like they just think that everybody's dumb and won't catch on to this. Brigham Young had no authority. He was a traveling minister. And yet they confess right here that Brigham Young usurped authority that was not his to use during the 1840s to take charge of the church in Smith's absence. What was Smith's absence? Being in jail. Brigham Young was not Smith's closest confidant. If anything, I have claimed to my third great grandfather, John Solomon Fulmer, was Joseph Smith's closest confidant. Because my third great grandfather stayed with Joseph Smith in that jail overnight, and then was ordered by Joseph Smith to go get the militia. And so my third great grandfather gave Joseph Smith his single shot pistol to protect him as best as possible with a single shot, and then ran off to get the militia, but didn't get back in time before the Warsaw Lodge mob and the governor's militia. So yeah. Anyway, I already did that video. So yeah, Brigham Young was not a confidant of Joseph Smith. Don't be fooled by the Mormons who support Brigham Young as successor. Don't be fooled by that. The statement here, occasionally took charge during the 1840s, is a clear indicator that Brigham Young was usurping authority that he did not have to use. And Mormons know that. If the stake president is not around to preside over stake conference, I, as an elder of the church, cannot say, hey, I'm going to take over and run the church now. Somebody's knocking at my door, but I can't answer it now, so they're going to have to wait or go away. Okay, so, yeah, Council, okay, according to Ben F. Johnson, according to Wilford Woodruff, nope, hearsay, not primary source documents. Campaigning after the death. Okay, so yeah, Brigham Young and Sidney Rigdon were the ones on August 6th. Wasn't that interesting? Oh, the next day they met. Okay. Return to Nauvoo. Yeah, well, the 6th of August has important significance in my life. But anyway, okay. The Conference of August 8th, 1844. This was the big debate as to who was to run the church. And so Sidney Rigdon got up there, wanted to be the guardian of the church. That's the wording. And they correctly put it in quotes. Rigdon couldn't come out and say he was the author of the Book of Mormon. That would have backfired on the whole plan to succeed, because that would have shown that there's something else going on, and then he would have to explain why he wrote the Book of Mormon rather than the Book of Mormon being an actual translation of ancient plates. And so, yeah, he can only say, I've been with Joseph this whole time, and I'm the only surviving member of the first presidency, and blah, blah, blah. So, unfortunately, that was not enough to convince people. You know, if he'd come out and confessed what the Smiths had been doing this whole time and why they were doing it, it may have had negative results. It may have had positive results. It definitely would have confused people and scared people. I mean, even talking about it today, as the Book of Mormon is coming to pass, with the Gadianton robbers taking over the government, placing a king on the throne of the United States, it's still difficult for people to actually accept, as I've done the videos on it. So, yeah, just imagine back then trying to point out that issue to the people. So that was Rignan's position. But then Brigham Young, Young called for a recess of 2.5 hours. When the recess resumed, Young spoke, emphasizing the idea that no man could ever replace Joseph Smith. However, I could do it. And here's why. He said that his traveling ministers had all the keys of the priesthood. And now we can go to section 107. Oh, wait a minute. They actually voted? The assembled church members then voted by common consent on whether or not democratic principle established by Joseph Smith, who taught that all things must be done in order to be common consent to the church. But no, they actually did this wrong. This was wrong. And I'll get to that in section 107. Accept the 12 as new leaders over the church. Okay, so no, this was not to choose who was to lead the church. This was to have the 12 lead the church. Thus, the Doctrine and Covenants passage about the pioneer wagon trains assembled into 50s, 100s, etc., claiming that the quorum of the 12 had authority. Okay. And yeah, those who opposed the vote for Young were all later excommunicated from the Nauvoo Church. If you're not for me, you're against me, and you're excommunicated. And so, yeah, this whole thing was done wrong. Yeah, Brigham Young played them for fools. All right, so let me upload this. I'll go see what the piece of paper is that was shoved under my door by the person knocking, and then I'll do a live video as I read from the section 107. Alrighty, I'm back, and it was 175 years ago this year when this succession crisis occurred. I did the math. And apparently the guys in my apartment, they all signed a birthday card for me, so at least they remembered, unlike my mom. So yeah, I was about to cry before I started this video because I remembered some childhood traumas, because it's afternoon already, and still my mom has abandoned any birthday wish through the email. And I've told you guys on other videos that she doesn't know where I am purposely. And when I was on Facebook, somebody got my email address from it and gave it to my mom. And then my mom started emailing me. And so, yeah, not cool, but I never respond, but I usually expect to hear from her. Most of the time to tell me how I need to move on, pull myself up by my bootstraps, and forget about the past. And, Yeah. And so, yeah, what almost got me crying was my 6th grade graduation at Sierra Vista Placentia Elementary. It was graduation, so there were no classes that day, and only 6th graders went for the ceremony. And I went through, got my certificate, and when it was all over, my mom had forgotten. So there I was, a little kid, alone, and just wandered to school in a state of shock. And of course that then triggers when my first wife drove off with my kids. And on that day, again, I wandered around the house just in shock. So, yeah, that's what I didn't want to bring up. So happy birthday to me. Alright, section 107. I need to be able to read, so I need to stop crying. All right. Verse 18, the power and authority of the higher priesthood or Melchizedek priesthood. It's the high priest of the Melchizedek priesthood, is to hold the keys of all the spiritual blessings of the church, all the keys of the priesthood, and to have the privilege of receiving the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, which are temple rituals, if they understood the definition, and to have revelation and enjoy the communion and presence of God the Father. Thus, the high priesthood is essential, and Nelson took that away from everybody. And here's the Aaronic priesthood. In verse 21, of necessity, there are presidents or presiding officers growing out of, or appointed of, or from among those who are ordained to the several offices in these two priesthoods. So Melchizedek and Aaronic priesthood is what they're talking about here. That there are presidents of the various offices within both the Aaronic and the Melchizedek. And as I told you, the Aaronic, deacon, teacher, priest, and it's a progression. You work your way up to the priest in the Aaronic priesthood. Whereas in the priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood, you start at elder, work your way up to 70, and then work your way up into the high priesthood. That's the goal of the Melchizedek priesthood. And of the Melchizedek priesthood, in verse 22, 3 presiding high priests. So Mormons know this. Oh, this is where it comes from, why we have a first presidency. Yeah, this is them. However, they are not chosen by the church. This was the mistake that they made back on August 8th, 1844. because they are supposed to be chosen by the body of the Melchizedek priesthood. And Brigham Young purposely left that out and changed things in this process. So, as all offices, all presidents of all offices in the church, they're supposed to be voted upon by the body of that office. Except when it comes to the first presidency, the presiding high priest. This, as it says, of the Melchizedek priesthood. It doesn't say of the high priest of the Melchizedek priesthood, 3 presiding high priests chosen by the office, by the body of the office. But it can be understood in that sense where appointed from those among whom are ordained to the several offices in those 2 priesthoods. So one could make the argument that only high priests can vote for the presiding high priest. That's an argument that could be made. But since Nelson said, nope, no more high priests, therefore, once all the high priests are dead and gone, there will be only leaders to appoint from among themselves who to be the next high priest. Yeah, if this were to be followed back in 1844, it would have been a lot different. You would have had to have everybody who was a high priest show up to conference on August 8th. And then the high priests, although it says in 22, which is kind of confusing, because in 21 it says high priests vote for their president, 70 vote for their president, elders vote for their president, priests vote for their president, which is technically the bishop, which they discussed earlier. But you have they have a priest who's the leader of the priests, though, so that they have somebody to gain experience. But then you also have president of the teachers appointed by teachers, and deacons by deacons. And so it would seem that there's a title, an office missing here. But chosen by the body of the Melchizedek priesthood is the way it's worded. And you can say, well, it's grammatically incorrect, and you'd probably be right, but that's not what it says. So 22, somebody could also make the argument it could be anybody from the Melchizedek priesthood. It could be a 70, it could be an elder who says, I want claim to be the president of the church as successor. And that's completely different and foreign to the Mormons these days, isn't it, Mormons? And so this is how Joseph Smith set it up. If he were to be murdered and not have the succession in place that he had intended. And yeah, 1835 is when he came up with this. And so, as you can tell, there were people claiming he was beginning to make changes to succession, but he never got them officially in writing for that process. Although some, like James Strang, tried to claim there was legitimate documentation. And so, yeah, this was what Joseph Smith had established originally. And so, yeah, everybody who had claim was supposed to appear at conference on August 8th. And it only became Brigham Young and Sidney Rigdon. And No, that was not, no, no. So, yeah, this is Mormons believe this is God's word. This is the way God intended it, Mormons. You know that. You can't deny it. You've learned English grammar. It's not something that can be twisted and manipulated like a lawyer, like President Oaks was a lawyer and judge. If you saw my Book of Mormon reveals Church of Lucifer, I quote him. He's a pure evil doctrine person because he knows how to manipulate the minds of people through legal speak. Which is easy to discern if you understand the basic simple principle that if you're denying people their rights to life, liberty, and property, you're in the wrong. And so lawyers, if the lawyer is lying in order to get his defendant off, well then the victims are out in regards to their rights to life, liberty, and property. And if the accusers are lying, then the defendant is out with his rights to life, liberty, and property. And so you can't have prosecutors lying, you can't have defense lawyers lying. So that's not what the courts are for, is to see who can get away with what. We've sort of messed that up in our nation. Anyway, this is the church. And so Joseph Smith intended each office to choose their president as successor. But in verse 22, he left that out. And people can assume 21, but he left it out in 22. And so as written in verse 22, chosen by the body of the Melchizedek priesthood, which includes the 3 offices of elder, 70, and high priest. And like I told you, 70s have been done away with at the stake level. So, yeah. So that's how Joseph Smith intended it in the 1835 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants. And Brigham Young was using this section to justify his position. And see, in verse 23, it then talks about the traveling 12 counselors are called to be the 12 apostles or special witnesses of the name of Christ in all the world, thus differing from other officers in the church. They're not the administration, they're missionaries. So they differ from the administration offices in their duties of their callings. 23, section 107. And then here's where Brigham Young justified his succession. Verse 24. And they, the 12 traveling counselors, form a quorum, equal in authority and power to the 3 presidents previously mentioned. Oh, we have all the keys in our quorum, which is not administrative. And it just said in 23, they don't have the key to authority, leadership authority. And yet Brigham Young said, no, 24 says we've got it. Even though we're different, we got it. No, he lied. He lied. See, more members should have brought their Doctrine and Covenants with them that day to conference and should have looked at it and read it and said, hey, wait, no, no. Verse 21 and 22 say otherwise. We're missing some people here. But nobody did because nobody bothered. And everybody just came to watch. And then everybody voted according to their feelings. Nothing more than feelings. Alright, so that's where it comes from. And so the vote that actually did happen was in accordance with what happened here in the end of verse 22. See, after the Melchizedek priesthood or the high priest, not quite sure, after their vote for the new president of the church, then afterward, that vote is to be upheld by the confidence, faith, and prayer of the church. Big difference, isn't there? And the church has changed this. We no longer vote, do we? Nope. We go right to upheld by the confidence, faith, and prayer of the church. We call it the sustaining vote. So Brigham Young sure messed this up. No votes. We will not have anybody voting. I will decide. And then everybody else has to just raise their arm to the square and say, yes, we support. And do the Sinclair Broadcasting robotic announcement that they are impartial and non-biased in their reporting. Maybe I should find that for this one as the video link. Sinclair link. Hope I'll remember. Okay. Yeah, when I heard that from my local Sinclair broadcasters here in Utah, because I'd switched to them after Fox was refusing to cover the information about Trump, because I had found out from another source that Trump was doing certain things, and I went, hey, what? Fox didn't cover that. What's going on? Why isn't Fox covering that? And sure enough, Fox isn't covering it. And so I said, oh, no, I need to know what Trump is up to. And so I said, see ya, Fox. See ya, Weather Girls. And off I went. And they were both engaged and all this crap too. And so off I went to Sinclair. And then Sinclair pulled that stunt. And no. I didn't even know every station was doing it. I thought it was just the local Utah station that decided they were going to do it. And that in and of itself was enough for me to say, no, you don't read that from a script. No, if you can't do it naturally, as if it's understood by you in that position, no. If you have to read it as a script, no, you lost me. And so that's when I looked elsewhere and found Rachel Maddow. And I've been in love ever since, even though she has a girlfriend. So good luck to her and her girlfriend, but yeah, I will always be loyal to Rachel until I no longer hear news from her. She's the only one that does news. There are others who do news, but then they throw in commentary and panel discussions and opinions and blah, 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 and other stuff that's not even news. But Rachel, yeah, she's singularly focused. It's all about presidential news, but it's news. So I got to go elsewhere. I go to Judy on PBS for other stories throughout the world and other stuff that's going on. And then some other stations for their news coverage, but because of the other extra stuff they put in it, I don't care to keep listening. So like the Young Turks, for example, they start off with the news report, and then after they finish the news report, then they have a discussion. And that's where I cut them off. Okay, I heard what you had said with the news, now I'm out. The only one I'm actually interested in hearing opinions of are from Anna. So, everybody else, nah. But it was cool. There was a YouTube channel that had, I can't remember the name of the channel, but one of the hosts was a woman, and she was awesome.
it wasn't really news per se. It was more like what I do. And so she may have been the one inspiring me to do my channel the way I'm doing it now. But her story was, or her method was to do comedy satire about topics and political topics. And so yeah, she's awesome. And I saw her, she now occasionally will fill in on the weekends to do a show on TYT. So good to see her still around. Anyway, where were we? So yeah, that's basically how it works. If all of the leaders were to be assassinated in Rome, which was a high-risk maneuver, the only way they could have gotten away with their lives is if they had actually paid the Pope and others of the Pope Mafia to ensure their safety and protection. Which, yeah, if they had a meeting with the Pope, that was discussed. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm very curious about the 27th of March. The sign in the heaven for that day it's got me curious. Because very curious. Because it has to do with serpents. Because Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer, and the right leg is where Jupiter is at right now, and will be on the 27th when the moon comes in conjunction. The supermoon in its third quarter, no. Is it? Yeah, I think it's first quarter as it's growing, then third quarter as it's dying. So it's this supermoon on the 20th, this Wednesday, which is Purim at 6 p.m. And I've done that video. So yeah, I'm very, very curious, because as much as I can identify signs in the heavens, I don't necessarily know the exact outcome from the signs. I generally know, and it has to do with every person shall, I'm trying to remember the quote, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ. When do people do that? During the coronation. Coronation, I thought, was last year. Yeah, last year. I can't remember the date. But yeah, it's interesting. That's why I wanted to do the succession of the man-child, one mighty and strong, the Jewish Messiah, Horus, whichever religion you call him by. Because, yeah, did you honestly think that the sign would be given of his birth? Which really isn't his birth. It's the start of the battle. And that there wouldn't be anything more. That's what people don't get. People just look for one sign and one sign only, and anything else that goes on, nah. So, yeah, there's a whole process going on here, guys. You guys are all being witnesses to it. So, yeah, early in the morning when I go running when there's no snow, I see Jupiter out there. He's saying hello to me. Okay, so yeah, this is the way it's supposed to work in the church, Mormons. And we've gone over an hour, it looks like. And so, depending on which method you want to use, if all of the prophets were gone, or even the first presidency, if Nelson dies, you automatically assume Oaks takes over for Nelson as the successor. It's not how it's done. What happens is that there is supposed to be a special priesthood conference where all of either the high priests or all the Melchizedek priesthood are supposed to gather and vote. And as was the August 8th conference, those who put forth their names to be the successor are supposed to be allowed to speak and campaign. And that's the format. Is the conference is supposed to be the format for the campaign to decide who is to be the next successor. So, for example, if Nelson were to die before April conference, I really wish this would happen so I could demonstrate what's supposed to happen. But he's a tough guy. He's the doctor. Doctors always live longer than they should. My grandfather, for example, my grandfather got leukemia, but because he's a dentist, and even though he served in World War II, he lived a longer life than expected because of that. But anyway, if Nelson were to die, this is the proper procedure. The church would announce, Nelson is dead. All Melchizedek priesthood holders who desire a claim for succession, please submit your claim. And then you have a vetting process where you say, oh, nope, you're only Aaronic priesthood. Sorry, no, don't you try to fool us. And others who have been excommunicated, given up their names to the church, they wouldn't qualify either. It'd have to be legitimate priesthood holders. Some, depending on whether you say high priesthood or not. But they would present their claim in that conference, an April conference. And priesthood sessions all set up perfectly for that. So that the Saturday sessions, I don't think they could have them on that day. They would have to start with the priesthood session in order to establish the new president of the church. And then what's supposed to happen is that they'd get up and give their talks. Wouldn't it be interesting if there would be somebody who would get up there and say, hey, I've got the keys of the priesthood. I've had the dreams according to Deuteronomy, or Numbers chapter 12. I did that video. In accordance with the Torah. And I have the keys of translation. And have rendered a translation of what would be considered part of the brass plates as indicated in the Book of Mormon, and confirms and restores the Torah as well as the Gospels and the New Testament. Can you imagine the audience? Everybody would be like, oh, what? But, it won't happen, will it? That's not the way it's done. And nevertheless, people would talk about why they think they're God's gift to man. And then people would say, oh, I think he looks cuter than that other guy. And these are guys picking, so they don't choose that way. It would be more like, well, Oaks has already got experience, and it should be his turn anyway, because that's the way it's been. And so, yeah, Oaks would most likely get voted in if we were to do it the right way. But, And so, as much as these apostles and prophets like to claim that they're humble, and that, we don't strive for the leadership of the church, we love God and want to do His will, and hope that the ones in front of us die first. And so, yeah, after the vote, then there would be a second session where the members of the church attend, and that would be, it has been proposed, it has been voted that so-and-so is now the successive president to Nelson, who has just recently died, and all those in favor, and do a solemn assembly first, I guess, and then do the sustaining vote. All in favor, manifest. All opposed, manifest. And then, yeah, I don't know how quickly it would be that he would be required to have counselors called. I don't know, 2 hours? Is that enough time? Probably not. But, you know. But, nope. Nope. He doesn't choose. I should have paid attention here. Verse 22. 3 presiding high priests chosen by the body of the Melchizedek priesthood. So they not only choose the president, but the counselors. Huh. So yeah. So the one with the most votes becomes president. The second most votes becomes the first counselor. Third most votes, third counselor. Interesting. So if, yeah, interesting. Because prior to this, Joseph Smith had multiple counselors beyond just 2. And other, Brigham Young had more than 2 counselors, and others have had more than 2 counselors. Heber J. Grant, I think, was one of them, which then resulted in Spencer W. Kimball, or no, Joseph Fielding Smith Jr., whoever was before him did it, and then Joseph Fielding Smith Jr. came in and stopped it. No more. We're strict. So, yeah. Huh. Wow. Wouldn't that be cool? So, Sidney Rigdon, first president of the church. James Strang, first counselor. David Whitmer, second counselor. Wouldn't that be interesting? Okay. So that's how it's supposed to be done. Wow. Wouldn't that be awesome, guys? Wouldn't you see the hand of God and all that? No. Instead, we got what we got. A corporation trying to secure their assets. Alrighty. That's it. Wow. Cool.